Hello. Habari. My name is Marion Kaplan. I am a journalist who was based in the United Kingdom when I wrote the following story about Professor Oku Singer. In 1976 I travelled to Ghana to interview Oku and his wife about their 5-year adventure in this progressive West African nation. Born in London, I lived as photojournalist and writer in Africa for 20 years. As freelance, I covered a broad range of stories for magazines and newspapers including National Geographic and Time in the United States and The Observer in London. My photographs have also appeared in many books. I first arrived in South Africa in 1956, beginning a decades-long love affair with a continent which has lasted all my life. It is the place in which I feel most at home, and return to most often. Listen to my story about a young African-American family who also loved the continent and twice moved to Africa in search of a better life. Can a Black American go back to the home of his forefathers and find a good and happy life in Africa? For almost 2 centuries U.S. Blacks have been groping for an answer to that question, many returning to Africa to escape slavery and later racism following emancipation, hoping to re-establish their traditional roots in a home and lifestyle they could truly call their own. The exodus began after the American Revolution when blacks found British promises of freedom from slavery a far better choice than servitude and shackles in the South, and then went to Sierra Leone when the Redcoats lost the Revolutionary War. It reached its peak in the Back to Africa movement of Marcus Garvey. The return to Africa continues today, even if involving but a minuscule fraction of the growing Black U.S. population. Africa, now flexing its muscles with its power finally unchained from colonial rule, has become many things to many people, but to many Black Americans the continent of their roots remains as ever a persistent far-off dream. Judson now Oku Singer is one youthful Black American who made that dream come true when he went there with his new bride, made his home in Ghana, became a father there, worked, laughed, struggled and created in Africa for 5 years. In the truest sense, Oku feels he grew to manhood in Africa and found a full measure of happiness he never knew before. I was able finally to save a life, says Oku. Living without racism was delightful. My wife and I found spiritual freedom, emotional stability and an environment full of love. Yet Africa was not all wine and roses for the Singer family, who are now back in the US as in America. Oku Singer learned that common labor is no way to make a decent living in Africa, and being Black was no particular job asset. With that lesson, he and his wife Olubi, formerly Marcia Louise McCrae of Philadelphia, returned to the States with 2 vows: to learn trade skills that will better fit them into the African economy, and most importantly to return once again to Africa to stay. I returned to the United States because the things I'll need are here in abundance, says Singer, and my chances of getting them are greater. I must have basic skills or knowledge that people need. Without these my horizons are limited. Being Black and having romantic ideas about Africa is not enough to merit Africa's love and respect. Then Oku Singer pointedly notes, for example, Africa needs technicians, farmers and trained midwives, rather than AVN representatives, short-order cooks or astrophysicists. He admits that when he went to Ghana, we were not adequately prepared. Consequently, our entire stay was a struggle and a challenge, but we loved most of it and are much better off because of our experience. Born Judson Singer 29 years ago in Columbus, Ohio, to parents in social service, Oku has traveled a long road in his lifestyle and thinking. After schooling in Pasadena, California, and Hawaii, the Army draft in 1967 while attending Pasadena City College sparked the ideas that eventually led to Africa. I was disturbed by how the U.S. was spending its money and the whole war machine, says Oku. My personal belief was that I couldn't deal with that, so I applied for and received conscientious objector status. Instead of the Army, Oku, along with 2 others, established Nairobi Cultural Center, a cultural center in East Palo Alto, a Black ghetto. We badly needed something like that in the community. Soon the center and its surrounding community became widely known as Nairobi, California, as an expression of militance and pride in the African heritage of the predominantly Black residents in East Palo Alto. I had learned in Hawaii of larger communities and worlds. Nairobi, California was another new experience, one that finally decided me to get out and travel, says Oku. I had been doing research on developing countries, particularly in Africa. I wanted to get out of the tech-fornical society, and since my concerns were with arts, I especially wanted to see new cultural worlds. Music, the guitar, occupied me mostly then, but my appreciation was wider as an artist. I considered South America briefly, and the Caribbean. But Africa came to fill my mind, and in the end Ghana was my destination. When Oku arrived in Ghana in May of 1971, he brought with him a new wife, Olubi, tall, slender, as gentle in her ways as her soft-spoken husband. Her name is Yoruba from western Nigeria, an African name acquired long ago, she can't remember when. It was a profound personal experience that turned Judson into Oku. 7 or 8 months before coming to Ghana, he recounts, I was riding with Olubi from Nairobi, California, to San Francisco. It was evening time. We were going to visit a friend, as it happens, a Japanese-American friend. Everything was pleasant. It was just one of those perfect days when good things happen. The sunset was beautiful. The clouds were rolling slowly over the mountains like surf breaking on rocks. I had a feeling of exultation. Tragic events could not change the world that day. Everything was good. I wanted to give a name to that day and called it Okudwim, a word meaning nothing but signifying for me, exultation. Olubi started calling me by that name. We were married 6 months later. In Ghana, Oku sounds by coincidence like many names, and everyone simply called me Oku. The sound and significance of names is important to Oku and Olubi. When a beautiful, almond-eyed daughter was born to them 3 years ago in Ghana, they called her Nonkululego Yatunde. They wanted a name that meant freedom, born free. The Zulu name Nonkululego is close to that. And, as it happens, smiles Oku, there's even a second material meaning. Hospital birth costs here, as compared with America, were so low then, no more than $2. But when Oku and Olubi came to Ghana, there was no Nonkululego. They came with a 45-day return ticket and the intention to visit. But we found it so interesting, such a pleasant change, that our stay extended. Just the physical environment and different culture was so stimulating. We decided to stay longer, and I enrolled at the University of Ghana in Legon in the Institute of African Studies, concentrating on African music. This was an exploratory stage. Oku and Olubi had savings then, and the cost of living was low. They were looking and learning, delighting in Ghana's exuberance and good fellowship. One day Oku, who is a skillful musician on guitar, sitar, flute, drums and African thumb piano, was asked to join a highlife band. For $2 a day or less, usually less, he played with F. Kenya's richest big band, traveling around with them to play at cocktail parties in Accra, the capital, or in small rural communities where mime and drama were mixed with the highlife sound to entertain villagers. Language was something of a difficulty, but Oku soon picked up fragments of the many dialects in the Akan group: Brong, Ashanti, Fanti, Akim, Nazima. At the coast, where he settled, he and Olubi had to know some Ga and Twi. But they managed. They learned to manage in other ways. Oku's income was negligible, their savings about gone, and even in the area some distance from Accra, where they made their home, costs were rising. Music could no longer sustain me, said Oku, financially as well as in terms of my enthusiasms. More and more I moved towards visual arts and began making handicraft objects that people would like. In addition, Oku taught arts and crafts at school, first at the Ridge Church School in Accra, later the Morning Star Preparatory School. I liked working with children, he says. You find out so much from what they say, and they have so little to lose by being honest. Oku and Olubi gradually settled into Ghanaian life. They made friends in the artists' informal world. Oku, too, was developing skills in himself he was previously unaware of. He found that could use his mind and his hands to make things, and it became his unstated objective to improvise for himself and his family most of the things they needed for daily living. He made a cooking stove, a bed, the child's cradle, chairs, tables, shelves. He made a workbench for himself and necessary tools from car parts. He made a furnace for smelting from collected fire bricks by using slow-burning palm kernels for fuel. He made a vise from scrap auto parts. He fixed up his own fluorescent light fixture from wood, turned a bicycle dynamo into a flashlight, and a lampstand into a work of art, interweaving carvings of man born in liberation with woman through an Ashanti Adinkra symbol standing for unity. Olubi, too, was expanding her own world. She built up an institute of African learning through which she taught nursery school classes to neighborhood children. Olubi's school was announced outside their house in Medina by a sign that has infinitely more charm than the usual school boards. In their yard hangs a wind chime that makes gentle sounds and looks compatible with the tree it hangs from. I like an interesting environment, says Oku. One small room of their house was a private gallery exhibiting works entitled, From Dust to Dust, in which a woman gives birth while death a skeleton awaits. There were more cheerful pieces like Mr. and Mrs. Dignity and Muhammad Ali, Son of Africa, both of which were put on exhibit at Ghana's National Museum of Art in the capital of Accra, Ghana. In the front of his house a welcome sign made from horn, feather, calabash, a twist of metal, spool and bits of this and that. On a door a design labeled, with humor and self-mockery, Oku's art thing, was hung. Quite the most outstanding of Oku's many sculptures, artworks, creations and contrivances was the wedding bracelet he made for his wife Olubi. They both preferred the idea of bracelet to wedding ring, and the finely wrought silver was Olubi's most cherished possession. But changes had to occur in the lives of the couple simply out of economic necessity. I learned something of the subtleties, the dynamics and nuances of life in Ghana, Oku says, but there was no hold. Ghana was the only African country we'd seen. We felt we needed to go somewhere else. I like being in Ghana and I like the opportunities, but the profession of artist is a very precarious one. I knew if I was to continue, I must study, expand my knowledge, acquire further education, discover new circles. The criterion to be met was that whatever I learned must be something the world needs. An artist, a sculptor, has difficulties in a narrow field, but in the broader area of design all kinds of opportunities and needs exist. So I decided to go back to America and develop more skills. Ghana was a vital, enriching experience. As an Africa-descended person, I have an idea now of what Ghana is about. But I'm part of a larger human family. I want to move, to travel, and look after my family. Now back in the States, Oku reports, I found to get all the knowledge I can on the casting of metal and general foundry work at both the practical and technical level. This will be a valuable supplement to my knowledge and skill as an artist. My one big lesson learned in Africa is that we black people need nation-building skills, skills to make us self-reliant. Oku Singer sums up his 5 years in Africa. During my stay, many things impressed me and many things disappointed me. The natural harmonious way of life was an overwhelming experience. Sensitive people can live peaceful and fulfilling lives in Africa, but America crushes them or causes them to develop tough shells from which they rarely emerge. Africans are naturally gracious and hospitable folk, and making friends is easier than breathing, he continues. People there do everything together. There are few secrets that remain secrets long. This helps to ensure the well-being of the community. Africans living together in a community love each other in ways we of the West may someday come to learn. The Africans we met struck a nice balance between pride and humility, and self-image is not much of a problem as it is with Afro-Americans. Speaking of black life in the States, Oku becomes somewhat more emotional and declares, during my 5 years of absence, it seems conditions are worse for the country in general and black folks in particular. We are succumbing to a well-orchestrated program against our freedom. We are unmistakably colonized people, and an atmosphere is being created to kill our revolutionary fire on the one hand, while the stage is being set which will allow for the severest repression against blacks and other poor people. We continue to be our own worst enemy. We African Americans have no overall unifying philosophy, and we're continuing to do our own thing to our detriment. If I were to bring a personal message from Africa to the brothers and sisters here, I'd say that mainstream American life will only compound our problems, and we'd better quickly create some alternatives. We buy liquor, dope, flashy cars and clothes which we don't produce before we'll build or buy our own homes, or support liberation efforts. Not uncritical of Africa either, Singer found dismaying bribery and corruption which is widespread and admits, Afro-Americans who travel to Africa soon realized that though we call ourselves poor, we are much better off materially than the masses of Africans. Oku found disturbing the fact that strong traces of the colonial mentality still has Africans thinking that which is foreign is superior and that which is indigenous is inferior. A return to African roots is not for most U.S. blacks, he warns. Any New World black returning to Africa must be able to regard Africans as equals, Oku declares. We've stirred some bad feelings in the past by truly coming off as ugly Americans full of condescension. We've cried out for telephones, hamburgers and discos while refusing to integrate ourselves into the unique experiences of the life and culture at hand. There are definitely African ways of doing things, and disregarding these, being unable to adjust, will only create problems. Anybody who can accept people's differences should find lots of friends in Africa. I made more intimate friends in Ghana than anywhere I've ever lived. The best advice I could give to Afro-Americans traveling to Africa would be to be themselves. Being positive gets more mileage than being slick. We are each individual ambassadors in a sense of the largest and newest Bayak tribe in the world and have more skilled manpower and education than any other. In Africa we are viewed as exotic strangers and first impressions are indelible. If we are beautiful people, we'll allow ourselves options in trying to create the realities we dream of. If we're niggers, we'll blow a potentially dynamite scene and nothing would please our oppressors more. Finally, Oku Singer reports that an income of $4,000 a year or more would allow the average Black American to live comfortably in rural areas or in the city. Adapting to African foods and customs is not difficult generally because their cuisine can hold its own against any other, although some foods definitely require getting used to, he notes. A warning from Singer is that no African government has openly expressed a willingness to accept Afro-American expatriates, and survival there is considerably more challenging than in the U.S., but the intangible benefits of being in the motherland makes life's struggles infinitely more worthwhile, at least to me. Oku and Olubi never had much money, but they had a dream they fulfilled for 5 years in Africa, living with love and moderation, enjoying the essence of life, learning and art. They answered a call of their heritage, yet realizing that Africa is part of a large world and seeking to find their place, both Africa and the world at large. They are going back one day, confident of fulfilling their personal vision of a beautiful